How does the Curator of History's job vary from your job as Curator of Collections?
The main thrust of my job is to collect, preserve, and share the three-dimensional objects in the museum. And we have a very large three-dimensional collection in the museum that encompasses clothing and textiles and china and earthenware and toys and recreation objects and musical instruments and decorative arts and Native American military equipment, typewriters, furniture, hand tools, artwork, on and on and on. It's a very large and eclectic three-dimensional collection, as opposed to two-dimension, which is paper, maps and diaries and things. So things that have dimension as part of my purview.
Has OHA always had two curators?
We've had two curators for about 20 years now. OHA had a director who wanted to become a curator of history. He was more talented in that area. And so the board decided to split the job. There was some money that came to OHA to fund that position. So they undertook that position. I think it was a very good idea, because it's become a staple position now and a very important position as well. So I think OHA certainly has benefited by creating that position.
What does your typical day consist of? When you come in, make your coffee, and come up to the office.
There really isn't a typical day, which I like. I like atypical days because they're not monotonous. I certainly have had my share of monotonous jobs. My job here at OHA is not monotonous. I would say it's very atypical. I could work on collections, whether the paperwork, documentation behind that, marking them, storing them. I could be creating a list of objects for an upcoming exhibit. I could be writing one or more articles for OHA's magazine, History Highlights, the CNY Good Life magazine, the Central New York Business Journal. I could be on the phone with prospective donors, emailing communication back and forth. I could be talking to fellow staff members about certain objects or projects, and it goes on. And I also will supervise college interns and about a half dozen community volunteers as well who work on their own projects. So I have my hand in a lot of different areas, which is good. I mean, I get up and move around. I'm not tied to a desk or a computer. I get to move around and look at things. And
do you have a favorite part of your job? If so, what is it?
My most favorite part of the job is to pick up that object and look at it as a piece of history that has information associated with it that I would like to know. I would like to find out and investigate. So when I have that opportunity to go and research a particular object, that's the fun part of my job, and I look to do that as often as possible.
How do objects come to the museum's collection? Is everything donated, or are some or any objects purchased?
So about 98% of the objects that come to OHA are donated by local citizens, but we also get items from around the country and sometimes from other countries as well. Generations, they pack up and move. They move to different states. And when those generations die off and the children or the grandchildren are then responsible for what to do with parents' and grandparents' objects, they don't always understand them, they don't always appreciate them, they don't always want to keep them. And so it's wonderful when they think about OHA and sending that object back home, per se, to its place of origin. It's thrilling. We've gotten all kinds of objects, clothing and Civil War objects, pennants and china and a host of things that have either been made locally and sold around the country or were used originally by local families, moved on, and then are now coming back to Syracuse and Onondaga County, which is thrilling. It's great to have those come back. OHA will buy certain objects if we deem them to be consequential enough to add to the collection. If that's the case, we may try to approach someone in the community to be the benefactor and ask if that person would be willing to underwrite the cost of buying that object and bringing it home. Again, there are a number of people, understandably so, who are not in a position to be able to just donate. Mm-hmm. They would like to, they're altruistic, but their pocketbooks are almost empty, their pockets are pretty thin, so they need money. And we're willing to negotiate and to come to some conclusion on how we can bring that object back for a price.
The Yorkshire Museum recently challenged curators from other museums all over the world to contribute to the hashtag Curator Battle, trying to outdo each other when it comes to certain items in the collection. A few weeks ago, OHA began its search for our hashtag creepiest object, and our curators have come to the conclusion that blank is OHA's creepiest object in the collection.
How would I fill in the blank? Probably the most popular creepy object is the mummy hand, which is once belonged to a young Egyptian girl and was sold to a local medical doctor from Syracuse in the late 19th century, before countries really strengthened their patrimony laws. Today you simply can't sell human remains from Egypt. That's a big no-no, understandably so. But at the end of the 19th century, those laws were less restrictive. So people did it. Mm-hmm. The nationalists were willing to sell and Americans were willing to buy. There are other anomalies. We have little pieces of petrified wood. We have oddities, canes, and walking sticks made out of deformed tree limbs. A couple of bird nests. We have a tortoise shell that has autographs on it, and a few other things that we keep because they are curios, they are curiosities, and they continue to entertain 21st century visitors to the museum. So if we can keep entertaining the folks who come to OHA, so be it.
Why can't you touch anything?
Actually, we're trying to move away from the please do not touch everything in the museum approach. Modern day museums are offering interactive stations, interactive objects. OHA actually has a whole other collection that's for hands-on. So we allow people to wear those clothes, those hats, those gloves. We allow them to apply the earrings and the necklaces, the boots, etc., etc., etc. And people donate specifically for that reason. So when Scott Peel, our education associate, is outfitting his actors for Ghost Walk, he uses that collection that is perfectly accessible for those folks to wear. And they may be period clothing. They may be late 19th, early 20th, mid 20th century objects. And it's okay. And we take those in with the understanding that if they're worn too often, they become unwearable, then we have the right to discard them. And That we take those things primarily because they lack provenance, background information on those. They may not be associated with Syracuse or Onondaga County, or we may have that already. We may have 2 or 3 or 6 of them. And so we'll take it with the understanding that people can wear it or use it for a program. And so OHA is starting to delve into that. Hopefully in the near future, we'll have more to offer for that, where students and community visitors can come and touch things, pick them up, smell them. I don't know about taste them, but certainly figure out through tactile, sensory, olfactory, sensory means to figure out what they are. And it's really cool. I mean, to be able to hold a stone projectile point in your hand that was made by a local Native American 1,000 years ago is just, I mean, to me, it's one of the coolest things there is to do. Our unguarded fingertips have oil and acid. And so fingerprints, the police, the FBI, they're always looking for fingerprints. Fingerprints are a telltale sign that someone from the past has touched something that will accept that fingerprint and hold on to it. And so we try to create a barrier between the acid and the oil in our fingers by wearing gloves. Some material is okay. I mean, rocks are okay to hold, but metal, firearms, swords, other metal objects, they aren't good to hold with unwrapped, ungloved hands, because they definitely will leave a fingerprint behind.
How do you mark objects when they are going into the collection?
So I thought I would show everyone just how we mark objects here at the museum, and I'm putting on a pair of gloves to form a barrier between my hands and the object, like I explained earlier. And this will keep the oil and acid from my fingers from migrating to this object. This is a tin can, and it once held coffee that was sold by the WAG Coffee Company. It's now empty, but it's a twist on top. And you can see WAG brand coffee, WAG Foods Incorporated, Syracuse, New York. So this is a nice object that we have for the collection. We collect all kinds of business merchandise, advertising items. It's got nice images on the sides, and it's in very good condition as well. The design is intact on the can. So when we are evaluating objects to decide where to mark them, we want to mark them in the most inconspicuous place of all. This object already has a number, OHA 7156. We have 2 different numbering systems at OHA. This is the first one. The second one that we adopted in the late 1980s is what we call a trinomial system. It uses the year, and the middle digit is the number of the donation, and then the third number in the trinomial is the object number. So we would be interested in knowing if this was the only object that was part of this 7156 donation, or if there were multiple objects. If there were multiple objects, we would put a dot and then a number 1 or 2 or 3, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when we mark this object, we want to put on a foundation. Everything that we mark has to be reversible. The process, we need to reverse the process. So we just apply a simple white foundation that we put it just a strip down here. We'll let that dry for about 10 minutes Then we take a fine tip felt pen, nothing sharp, no ballpoint pen, but a nice felt tip pen that won't create an indentation into the object, especially for soft material. And then after about 10 minutes or so, once this is sufficiently dry, then we'll write the number on that white foundation. And then we'll also let that dry for about 10 or 15 minutes. And then we'll take a clear coat, top coat, which is just clear nail polish. And after, like I said, 20 to 30 minutes, we'll shake this up, make sure it's good and shaken. And then we just take the brush and swipe it across pretty quickly, because otherwise it'll smudge the number. So we just take it zoop, right across like that, let that dry, and then we're okay to package it up for storage. If, as a double marking system, we could also write the number on here, and if I could throw this inside the can, or if it had a place to attach it, I could also attach this to it. This would be a secondary identification. I mentioned that we want it reversible. So if in the future we find out that's not a good place to have that mark, we want to put it someplace else, or for whatever reason we need to remove it, we just take acetone, usually nail polish remover, on a clean cotton cloth, put it on the cloth, and then just wipe it to remove that number. 99% of the time we don't. Sometimes in the past they've marked objects that are in conspicuous places, and it doesn't look good when we put them on display, so we'll change the location of the accession number. So that's it. That's how we mark objects here at OHA.
What is the importance of collecting and preserving?
We're collecting, preserving, sharing for not only the current generation, but theoretically for future generations. So when our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren succeed us and come to OHA or a host of other museums, we want them to be able to appreciate these 100, 200, 300, 400, 1,000-year-old objects.